Rio de Janeiro with a big man.
Welcome to Rio de Janeiro. This is Abid Imam. I'm super excited about the guest we have for you in this episode. It is Jane Fernandez. Now, she is one of Australia's leading sports administrators, and her most recent role was with Football Federation Australia as the General Manager of the bid for the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand. Just a few weeks ago from recording this, FIFA announced that Australia and New Zealand were successful in their bid for hosting the World Cup. It's very exciting news, and I'm pumped up for a World Cup to come here finally to Australia and New Zealand. Jane has so much experience in sport management. She's been working at the Olympic Games, the Asian Cup football, has great expertise in event management. And the beauty of this conversation is she shares so much insight in what it takes to bid for a World Cup. FIFA has been a lot more transparent. So Jane talks us through the big milestones in the bid process. It took many, many years. Some of the big moments. And I think the big takeaway from this conversation is appreciation of what it takes to host a World Cup, an appreciation of just how globally competitive it is to land a World Cup tournament, and an excitement for what's to come in the future. I think it's been a bit of a challenging time. That's actually an understatement, but it's been a very challenging time around the world. Just sprinkles of good news like this just give us a bit of an optimistic view of the future. And as usual, the one-stop shop, the main hub of all the goodies is abidimam.com, where there'll be links to all the things, all the cool stuff that we mention in the show. So let's kick off the conversation with Jane Fernandez. Jane Fernandez, it's an absolute pleasure for you to join me, and I've been so excited about this conversation because you're someone who had such a senior role, a major role in this amazing piece of news to give us some joy during this time with Australia and New Zealand being awarded the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. Absolute pleasure to have you join me.
Oh, it's great to be here with you to talk about the bid, and fantastic that we can also now talk about the fact that we're going to be hosting the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2023.
Before we get deep into that process, which is so fascinating, I would love to paint a picture of whereabouts in Australia you grew up and how you got involved in sport.
Yeah, so I'm from Sydney, born and bred. And, you know, like any normal Aussie kid, we played a lot of sport in the backyard. Summer and winter, we're always out there, our poor parents driving us around lots of different sporting fields. But actually, where I grew up, girls weren't given the opportunity to play football. Girls played netball, which I loved, and boys played football, and they also played rugby. So I came to know and love the game quite late in life. And we actually grew up going to lots of live sporting events, but football was never one of those events.
What did you play as a youngster?
I played a lot of netball, and I played in high school a lot of cricket, and we also did a lot of swimming, and running as well. So they were the major sports, but netball was probably and cricket were the main team sports that I participated in.
You've had a great career in sport management, behind the scenes of amazing sporting events as well. How did you get your start, and what were the initial steps in your journey as a sport administrator?
So I was really, really fortunate in that Sydney were awarded the rights to host the Olympic Games in 2000, and I finished university a little bit before that. So I went to university and did a Bachelor of Arts Leisure Management degree, and I always knew I wanted to work in major sporting events. I loved going to the events. I loved the power that major sporting events has to take you away from your day-to-day, and you just get caught up in the emotion of watching your team, your country compete at the pinnacle of their sport. And so I always knew I wanted to be part of that. And then when we were awarded the rights for the Sydney Olympic Games, I just knew that was going to be the start of my career in the industry.
What was your involvement with the Sydney Olympics?
I worked for the Olympic Coordination Authority, who were tasked with the big job of setting up the venues based out at Sydney Olympic Park, where the main stadium was located, plus a number of other key venues. So I started there in 1999, worked with a tremendous team, and from there we started building the common domain and planning on how we were going to operate the precinct areas out there at Sydney Olympic Park.
I understand it was 2005 that you moved into Football Federation Australia, and you were there for the beginning of this transformation of the sport. 2005 was an amazing year with the Socceroos making the World Cup. So what was it like being part of Football Federation Australia at that time?
Yeah, wow, it was just fantastic. I'd worked previously at ANZ Stadium in their events and operations team, working with, again, another amazing team. I've been very blessed to have been surrounded by some amazing leaders in sports administration who have taught me so much. So I left ANZ Stadium and then joined football at that rebirthing time. It was phenomenal just to see so many committed and passionate people about making sure that we could relaunch football, qualify for a World Cup, start the A-League, and just being part of that experience was something that I'll always value.
We qualified for the 2006 FIFA Men's World Cup. You got to go over, was it in a professional capacity or purely as a fan?
It was a professional capacity. In those days, FIFA actually allowed the member associations to manage tickets and hospitality and travel packages. We also did a lot of work with the Socceroos around open training sites, so our fans could go and experience watching the boys train and get autographs and interviews and really be part of the overall experience. So my role was coordinating a number of those different elements to World Cup. It was unbelievable. I mean, the support of the Australian fans who travelled to Germany, but also it was like the Socceroos became everyone else's second team. And so as we progressed through, the crowds were really on our side. And did you get there? Were you there in 2006?
Unfortunately, I was too young. I was in year 11.
Yeah.
I wish I could have postponed my exams and gone,
Yeah.
but it planted the seed.
It was great. And I remember when we qualified for the round of 16 and back at the hotel in Stuttgart, lots of fans turned up and they were cheering with Mr. Lowy. And I think that some of them even had him crowd surfing at one point.
Wow. What was your highlight of that entire World Cup?
Yeah, wow. I think I'll always remember the first game in Kaiserslautern when we were playing Japan, and it was we were down, and finally to win that game really set the momentum, set us going forward right through to the round of 16.
An amazing night. Oh, just the generation of football fans that event has inspired. And we're going to talk about the bid soon, but I feel like these are all really important steps on the journey. And another one was 2010, where we bidded for the 2022 FIFA Men's World Cup up against some really imposing countries: Qatar, USA, Japan, South Korea. I understand you were involved with that bid. How do you actually reflect on that process where we learnt a lot of harsh lessons?
Yeah, we certainly did. So that's 10 years ago now. So it was a very different time. It was a very different FIFA. The bid that we've just run, it was a very transparent bid. We were able to see who voted for who, and those transparency measures weren't in place for 2010. So it was a very different process, run in a very different way. And, there's been a lot reported around the process and the outcome of the process. And, I mean, needless to say, it's been such a different experience. Obviously, having a smile on our faces, having come up trumps is always really, really great as well, a very, very different emotional roller coaster. But I think FIFA learnt a lot from those times, as did we as bidders. I think we've all learned as a part of the process, and as a result, we were able to put forward a bid that was really sold the dream for our country and for New Zealand.
From the fans' perspective, looking through the documents that FIFA were posting about the bid. You'd read all the bid books. You could see who voted for who, as you said. That transparency was so refreshing, and you just wish that we had that for 2010, because it would have been so interesting to see what mark we would have got out of 5 in that objective criteria. But I guess that's history now, isn't it?
That is absolute history now, and it's nice to know that we can go forward towards 2023 and start planning with New Zealand to deliver the best ever FIFA Women's World Cup.
When did that planning start? So when was the idea launched of us bidding for the 2023 World Cup?
Well, actually, when we delivered the Asian Cup in 2015, we had spoken around the opportunity, the possibility of going forward and bidding to host the FIFA Women's World Cup. But the timing just wasn't right. We weren't really ready to do it. And then in 2017, we regrouped and we had another discussion around, okay, maybe now it's time that we get back together and put in a bid for 2023. So that's exactly what we did. We started with a feasibility review of hosting a World Cup, and with the support of the federal government, we were able to progress and put forward a bid. At that time, we were bidding solo. So we moved quite fast, actually, in bidding just as Australia only until 2019, when FIFA expanded the competition, the FIFA Women's World Cup, to 32 teams.
The early days, there was, I understand, a roadshow. So you were meeting with governments back in 2017 to get that support from federal, state governments, which would have been really important. How did you approach that? And was 2010 at all mentioned? Because in the media reports, that $46 million taxpayer money was talked about a lot. Were governments able to see the new opportunity and look beyond all of that? Was that an easy conversation?
Yeah, so we started with the federal government, and then once we knew we had their support, we progressed to holding a big stakeholder workshop with all of the governments across Australia. Absolutely, it was mentioned at the start, and there are lots of questions around the transparency of the process. And governments had to be certain that this time the process would be transparent, which we were able to give them that certainty. It was also a really important time for women's sport. So women's sport has just gone from strength to strength. We just held, just recently, I went to the Cricket World Cup there at the MCG, almost a full house, and it's wonderful to see women's sport on centre stage. Governments understand the power of sport. They understand the importance of sport to drive outcomes, gender equality, inspiring generations of girls to compete at their best. And all of those things helped buoy government support. And that's how we were able to move forward.
I've read somewhere that you said the bid was about being strong, confident, creative, the way that we play football. When you're the general manager of the bid, what is your process of oversight, and how much are you across? Because it's such a massive process.
It is. It's a huge process. The most important thing for me is having the right people in the right roles. So we built a fantastic team. A number of the team had worked on the Asian Cup, so had really great knowledge in delivering first-class football competitions and tournaments. We had varied skill sets, so we all complemented each other really well. And then on top of that, we also had a number of steering committees, and we ensured that we had the governance in place that was needed to check off everything that was being developed and put forward to FIFA. And then when we joined forces with New Zealand, again, there was an additional joint bid steering committee that was in place, just again as a nice way to check all the balances, make sure everything was in as FIFA needed. And so it all comes down to having the right people in the right roles and building the team. No different to a football team.
On a football team, there's 11 on the pitch. How many were on the pitch for you?
Not that many, unfortunately.
Oh, really?
No, at our peak, we probably had about 8 people. So it was a very lean team, very small team, but a very experienced team.
The football politics side of it is really, really fascinating. So FIFA used to have the ExCo, or the executive committee, who had 22 members. Now it's the FIFA Council, which is a 37-member, extremely diverse group of football stakeholders from around the world. That 37-person council were ultimately responsible for voting on the candidate countries. Can you please take us into a little bit of that FIFA Council and how you targeted or tried to put your case forward to them, and what opportunities you had to do that?
Yeah. So COVID really changed our strategy around this. I mean, originally, and it's always better to have face-to-face meetings whenever you can, and they started in France at the World Cup in 2019. And then once we were all unable to travel anymore because of COVID, we really had to pivot the strategy and start sort of looking at, okay, how are we going to engage the FIFA Council members, those that, as you rightly say, are the ones that cast the votes. And so we were able to, develop a lot of specific content around telling the story of football in Australia and how it would resonate with the different confederations. There are obviously a lot of Zoom calls and phone calls between FIFA Council members and our president and the president of New Zealand Football. And I'd say that the fact that we got the highest evaluation score, 4.1 out of 5, meant that we were the strongest candidate. And so being able to leverage off that, to really tell the story and to authentically communicate that this bid is something that the whole of Australia and New Zealand want. We had over 800,000 people sign up to support the bid, and we were able to demonstrate that not only will we deliver the best ever FIFA Women's World Cup, we'll also make sure that we leave a legacy for our countries and for our region.
I'm really interested in how or what rules were in place. For instance, when you interact with a FIFA Council member, did it always have to be in a super transparent way in terms of it's reported here, or do you have conversations that are one-on-one? Like, what were those lobbying opportunities like?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, transparency, number one. Under the bidding regulations, there's certain rules that you have to abide by. Whenever you're presenting on your bid to FIFA Council members or to other people that may be advocating on your behalf, and every call is reported to FIFA. So FIFA is aware whenever you're presenting or going to have a conversation with any of the council members. So again, 100% transparent. And there was a certain level of compliance applied to all of that. And we were 100% transparent in all of our reportings to FIFA.
My name is Abid, and we're talking about the bid. So I do recognise there's irony there, and I'll share with you that in high school I was student councillor every single year as elected by my peers, because I had a slogan called "Make a bid for a bid."
Oh, very good.
I'm interested in your bid book, which is 188 pages, an absolute masterpiece. And if any football fan or sports fan is interested in this World Cup, I think it's a great read. That book, how long did it take to compile? Because you talk about articulating your message.
Yeah, so we actually wrote 2 books. The first book is Australia only. And because we were bidding for so long without New Zealand, we had to, based on the timelines, we had to have a book ready to go. And then when the competition was expanded, and at that point in time, some of the requirements changed. They grew as well. And so what that meant was FIFA gave further time to develop and to submit the book. So originally it was October of 2019, and then it got extended into the December. But the way we started, and we did start early on purpose because we knew the amount of work that needed to go into the bid book. We looked at the requirements for 2026 for the Men's World Cup, and we looked at the chapter outline that was developed for that competition, and we really based our starting point off that. And so members of the bid team owned different elements of the bid book. We had an amazing editor of the bid book, a lady called Jill Davies, who is actually the mastermind of the Sydney 2000 Games. And so Jillo joined the team, and we're at a really great point in finalising the book, and then very quickly we joined forces with New Zealand, and we had to, sort of start again. Really, we had a great framework there, but then we moved very fast in working with New Zealand to ensure that the As One bid told the story of two countries.
So there would have been some, if I'm right to say, some sleepless nights, because that's a really short turnaround to change and now be adding another country to the equation.
It really was. It was a huge, huge effort by so many people. We had representation from New Zealand. Representatives came over to FFA. We had a great big workshop, and it meant that we had to make decisions really quickly. And sometimes that's not a bad thing. It means that there's less time to labour over certain points, and we just all had to agree to move forward. So we came up with As One. A member of my team, Kim Anderson, came up with As One, and everyone loved it straight away. So we very quickly brought that to life. White Kite, the agency who developed the brand for the bid book, very quickly came up with a new brand that told the story of As One, and then the writing continued. A lot of sleepless nights, as you say. I think I've aged 100 years on this bid. But it's all for a good cause.
In February 2020, this year, FIFA sent a delegation of 5 officials to Australia and New Zealand for the inspection. For some reason, I'm just picturing a rent inspection, but I know this is so much more detailed and high level. Can you please take us into what is a FIFA inspection like?
Yeah, so look, when a lot of thought and planning went into the development of the actual tour, and whilst FIFA gave us the list of the infrastructure, the stadiums, the training sites, the facilities they wanted to inspect, we spent a lot of time in thinking about how do we actually want them to feel? What do we want them to feel when they leave Australia, when they leave New Zealand? And that helped us craft a number of the activities around the inspection program. We wanted to make sure that they knew that we were operationally seamless, that, from the moment they got off the plane, everything would be organised and everything would be on time, which it was. But we also wanted them to have fun. We wanted them to see the way that Australia and New Zealand deliver these major sporting events, technically excellent, but also with a big smile and a big laugh and really an enjoyable experience for all. So that really set the scene, and that really guided us on how we developed and delivered the inspection program. So they chose the cities that they went to. So they started in Melbourne and then went to Adelaide and then finished off in Sydney in Australia before heading over to Wellington and looking at a number of cities over there in New Zealand. Sydney has been proposed as the venue for the final match. So Sydney was really an important element in the inspection. We took them by ferry from Sydney Harbour down the Parramatta River to Stadium Australia. And that was a really unique experience. Thank goodness the sun was shining, so they had a lovely trip. But it is a form of transport that we've used in the past during the Asian Cup to take dignitaries and VIPs to the stadium. But it really is a unique experience, something that they really do remember.
Well, what were some of the other fun moments that they had? Were there interactions with the Aussie Animals, going to grassroots football games? What other things helped sway them?
Yeah, so we had one of our selling points is that we truly are multicultural. And so at every training site they wanted to see, we had grassroots kids kicking around, but we also made sure we had kids from many different countries. And at every site, because they speak Spanish and they speak French, the FIFA delegation, we had French or Spanish kids coming and addressing FIFA in their language, which was just, it's just the 1%ers all the time. Just the little points of difference. We dressed up all of the sites with the As One branding, so it looked like it would look during a World Cup. Another highlight for me was we took FIFA to the proposed site for the International Broadcast Centre, and we dressed it up so it looked like a broadcast centre. We had drawings of how we could set it up. It showed them that we'd actually already done the thinking in the planning. It means for them that a lot of the work's sort of already done. So they were 100% confident that I mean, they know we can deliver a fantastic tournament from what they saw during the inspection tour.
This was in Feb, so it was slightly before everything hit in terms of COVID in Australia and New Zealand, in terms of travel as well. So really great that it could be done before anything like that happened. And at this point, Japan and Colombia were the only three nations, or the only nations going up against us. Do you know why Brazil fell out of the race?
Look, I only know what was publicly reported, and they referred to the impacts of COVID, and they referred to the financial situation that they were going through. I really felt for them and I felt for all of the bidding teams that decided to not keep going. So much work goes into these bids by so many people, and to then have a situation where you know that you can't continue would just be heartbreaking.
We were given a 4.1 out of 5 for a number of criteria, 70% infrastructure, 30% commercial rating. I'm just looking here at some of the things that FIFA were highlighting. We got a low risk for pretty much everything. There was only one that was a medium risk, and every other bidding nation had a medium risk for this as well. It was around the legal and government support documents. And I was just wondering if you could walk us into why that was a medium risk and what that entails.
Yeah, sure. So FIFA provide a number of different agreements that need to be executed. They also provide government guarantee templates that need to be executed. The Australian government executed all of the government guarantees. However, as you're aware, current governments can't bind future governments to anything. And so whilst the guarantees were executed, there's always a cover letter that goes with that, just explaining how legislation works in Australia. Whilst we all know the risk is minimal, from a FIFA perspective, they have to note that there is a potential risk there. And every country, as you say, the final ones that went through had that medium risk noted. But yeah, the Australian government were just so supportive and so fantastic in actually executing all of the government agreements.
I do know it's quite complicated, having gone to the Brazil 2014 World Cup, and I know that they don't allow, for instance, alcohol to be sold at matches because of fan violence. But during the World Cup, because one of FIFA's main commercial partners is Budweiser, they needed to make sure that alcohol could be sold in stadiums for those games. And it involved those government support documents and that to be passed. So that is an interesting side that I guess we don't always think about, what it takes to get a World Cup.
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, we won't have that issue here in Australia, the alcohol being served in stadiums, but in a number of countries, you're right, it is an issue and it is a challenge, and there are workarounds for all of it.
Australia got 4.1, Japan 3.9, and Colombia 2.8 out of 5 in terms of the objective ratings of our bids. When you found that news out, was that like one of the best mini wins on the journey?
It certainly was. Oh my goodness, it was such a relief. It was such a relief because I knew how important it was to get the top score. I knew that once we had that top score, then the opportunity to really leverage that, to really push for our position, it was just so much stronger. So yeah, that was an anxious evening, and the date that report was going to be released kept moving. And FIFA put so much work into writing that report. So I can understand why they didn't want to confirm the actual release date until very late. Yeah, it was such a relief to get that score.
Yeah, that bid evaluation report was 228 pages, but it was really fascinating reading as well, because I've never really seen that from FIFA before, just that level of, okay, this is what we think, this is transparency as well. Really refreshing. And of course, to see Australia and New Zealand so well rated was a big step.
The first time they'd conducted such a process was for the 2026 men's bid. And that was Morocco, and then the united bid between Canada, the USA, and Mexico. So that was the template that they used, and it's just very rewarding to know that not only did we get the top score, but they've implemented this process for the Women's World Cup as it should be.
Yeah, on 2026, actually, Craig Foster is someone who's been on this podcast, and I'm a big fan of his efforts towards social justice and I think events using their platform, athletes using their platform as well to create social change. And through this process, FIFA have also wanted the bidding nations to have a focus on human rights and sustainability. How did we think about that in our bid?
Yeah, well, it was definitely a priority because we knew how important it would be to FIFA. In the bid book itself, there's a number of chapters that reference sustainability, human rights. There's a dedicated chapter to it, but then also there's a legacy chapter where we reference that as well. So it was always absolute priority. Leaving a legacy was always front of mind for us from bidding as well as hosting. So it was always extremely important. We partnered with a representative from Griffith University to draft the independent assessment of our human rights and sustainability plans. So that was it was quite eye-opening actually that FIFA required every bidder to have an independent assessment. So that just shows you how important it is to them. And it's great that we ended up with a low risk around that area. It again puts us in the front seat for being able to ensure that we deliver a FIFA Women's World Cup that contemplates sustainability and again leaves this lasting legacy for the game, for the country and for the region.
What are some of the legacies that our World Cup, Australia, New Zealand 2023 will be about? What are some of the key targets you want to see after the World Cup?
Yeah. So in the legacy chapter, the proposal we put to FIFA, we broke it down into 4 key pillars. The first one being around participation. So more women and girls playing football. FIFA have set the target of having 60 million women and girls playing by 2026. And that's something that we can help them achieve. We've spoken before around our commitment to having 50-50 in registration and participation levels, and that's something that hosting the Women's World Cup can help us achieve. We also commented around pathway opportunities for women and girls, so ensuring that that we are able to have girls' academies and increase the amount of matches Matildas are playing and youth teams are playing to further develop the athletes, the footballers, but also around capacity building as well. So around women's leadership, around ensuring that we've got more female volunteers, coaches, leaders right throughout the game. And then the last pillar was around facilities investment. So ensuring that we have the facilities needed to cater for the additional women and girls playing the game is also extremely important. The next step for us is to further expand on the 4 pillars. And so within FFA, we'll start looking at developing this legacy framework. And the legacy framework will be developed in consultation with FIFA and also with the broader football community, because whilst we know that we can deliver a fantastic tournament, we want to deliver much more than that, and the potential is just endless.
It was June 2020 where the FIFA bid evaluation reports were announced, and we had that fantastic rating. Now we were just counting down to June 25, which was the date that FIFA's council would meet, and it will be announced who was the winning bid. What were those last few weeks like? And it was really fascinating with the political side of things because Japan's bid, Japan fell out of the race. Are we aware, was it about COVID as well? What happened for Japan too?
Yeah, they also put out a public statement referencing the impact of COVID. They also noted that the As One bid gained the top score, and they very graciously pulled out of the race, providing solidarity for Asia, really. And again, I really felt for their bid team who'd we'd met along the way. So much work had gone into their bids. But yeah, look, there's a number of different elements that lead to bidders falling out. But their support was just fantastic, as was the support of the whole Asian Football Confederation.
So it was up between Australia and Colombia. Something that was fascinating as well was the
the talk around some of the UEFA or the European members of the FIFA Council who were reported to be on Colombia's side because they saw that competition of the FIFA Women's World Cup as a development opportunity for that part of the world. My own view is that the FIFA Women's World Cup, the FIFA Men's World Cup is the pinnacle of the game, and it should get the best platform possible. How were you getting this sort of intel about potential voting blocks that were happening, and how were you dealing with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with your view of the pinnacle of football, the World Cups. That's exactly what they are. So we're definitely aligned there. Well, I mean, UEFA actually came out and publicly supported CONMEBOL, so everyone knew that was going to be their position. It's interesting when you're talking to voters. You never know. You never know until the votes are cast. The decision that's going to be taken, and all we can control is the message that we give. All we can control is the bid that we develop and we put to FIFA, and we believed in our bid and we believed in the importance of the Women's World Cup, and we just continued on that path. We never wavered, but it's always very nerve-wracking because you do never know until the votes are in.
What are those final days like? I've seen footage of Chris Niku. He's the president of Football Federation Australia. James Johnson is the CEO. They were, I think it was even the day of the announcement, they were at Sydney Opera House. Of course, all the great pictures of Australian footballers, our players, were beamed onto the Sydney Opera House. It was a great event. But then they're on their mobile phones, and you can tell that they're having some really high-level discussions. Were these high-level discussions happening right up to the last hours?
They were. Yeah, they really were. Back at the FFA office, you don't stop talking and you don't stop calling until the meeting starts. So yeah, Chris and James were absolutely on the phone, as was representatives from New Zealand football. But it's just something that you just have to keep going until the votes are in. And they did an amazing job in ensuring that we had the support to be able to win. But the lighting of the Sydney Opera House was just phenomenal. I mean, we had, as you say, football imagery projected onto the Opera House. One of the most beautiful moments for me was having the image of Julie Dolan on the Opera House sails, but we also had Julie there in person. And just seeing her response, she was so overwhelmed. And she said, I could never have imagined that this could happen. And that's what this is about. That's exactly what this is about.
Julie Dolan, the first ever Matilda. What a name. What a legend. How was that last day for you? If you can take us through.
I didn't have much sleep. The few days before it, we were all pretty flat out. And then that led into the Opera House moment. And then we also hosted a Facebook Live, which Tara Rushton hosted for us. And all of these events all led into the final moments. All of the two remaining bidding nations had access into the FIFA Council meeting for that agenda item.
Yep.
So we were able to see all of the FIFA Council members. At that point in time, our final presentations were played to the council members. That's when they firstly got to see them. Our final opportunity to present our case. And then we were actually in the meeting whilst they were voting virtually. So that was it was so tense in the room. The anxiety that we all felt was just immense. And then we had to wait. We had to wait until the FIFA president was moved rooms and went into the announcement room, if you like, which was beamed out to the world. So it felt like hours. It wasn't, but it felt like days.
I've done a few PowerPoint presentations in my life, but who's doing your presentations? Because that would be one of the most nerve-wracking moments ever.
Yeah, so originally the rules were each bidding nation could prepare a 10-minute video package, and you could put whatever you want in the package. And then just before, a couple of days before, the FIFA Council decided that they'd like to hear from the two bidding nations. So Johanna Wood, who is the president of New Zealand Football, spoke on our behalf as she's a FIFA Council member. And then the FIFA Council member from Colombia also spoke. So they did a brief intro each, and then that led into the playing of the video package.
I think it's a little bit of a famous photo, famous video of the reaction of Australia and New Zealand being awarded the rights for the 2023 World Cup. You've talked about it in depth. I've heard you talking about how I don't think you've never jumped that high in your life. What are your recollections of that specific moment now?
Yeah, well, like as I say, it felt like hours. We were waiting for the FIFA president to make the announcement, and I was sitting next to Mark Falvo, who's the CEO of Football Federation Australia, and I think I said to him, "I can't stop my right leg from shaking," and he said, "I can't stop my right eye from twitching," and then it was like all adrenaline fueled. And then, I mean, when the announcement came, we heard the AU. I don't even think we waited to hear the whole Australia, New Zealand, and then we were just up. I mean, so much effort, so much energy had gone into this bid. It was such a relief and so exciting. I honestly have never jumped that high. That is pure adrenaline.
And it was a really special moment because Lucy Zelich and Craig Foster were doing a live The World Game segment as well. And their emotions, they were both on Zoom, I think, and it was really special. I think I was a combination of giggling and laughing, giggling, laughing, crying, a bit of everything, because it just reminded me of 2010, and me and some friends, we were just so hopeful about getting a World Cup here in our country, and we went to a football pub to watch it, and I just started crying, and they had to carry me out. And everyone was just laughing at me because there was a few nightclubs right next door, and there were people lining up. And they said, "Who's this guy crying here? What's he crying about?" Emotional wreck.
I hope this time they were tears of joy.
Yeah, they were. Yeah, and it's like all of a sudden, in just like a second, there's just all this positivity about life in the next few years because a World Cup is coming to our country.
It just, the amount of joy it has brought so many people has just made me so happy. And at a time when we all need some good news, at the press conference the next day, the New South Wales Premier basically said that, you know, she'd been up speaking in front of everyone for so long now around and having to give messages that aren't so great, but to be able to actually announce something that is so great for the country, it's just overwhelming, the level of support we've received.
What was the day after like? Does FIFA get in touch with you straight away and it's on to working, or are you able to let your hair down a bit?
Yeah, the FIFA guys we've been working with were on the phone straight away, which was great. We've already had a number of kickoff meetings with FIFA, and now the work begins. So we'll set up a World Cup office as part of FFA, and for the next 6 months we'll start working with FIFA on selection of stadiums and host cities and ensuring everything's in place. The foundations are set to deliver an amazing World Cup in 2023.
Because most countries usually have a lot longer to prepare for a World Cup. Like I remember, it's usually 6 to 7 years, but now it's 3. So I think things do need to accelerate, don't they?
Yeah, it's not long at all. You're right. We don't need to build any stadiums. Sydney Football Stadium is already under construction, and that will be the only newly built stadium. So in that respect, we're really fortunate to have such great infrastructure in Australia and in New Zealand. So the next step now is developing the FIFA entity that will deliver the tournament, and starting to, again, the right people in the right roles, having the governance structures in place, and really engaging with the broader football family to deliver a World Cup that we're all proud of. When we started building the bid, we wanted to make sure that we delivered a bid, regardless of winning or losing, that the football family and the country would be really proud of. And that was one of the first targets we set ourselves. Having lived the 2010 experience, we wanted to make sure that the community was involved from the word go, and that's why we set up the Community Bid Champion program. So grassroots were with us all the way, and we want that to continue in the delivery of the tournament.
I'm going to speak to you with my West Australian cap on now, and I'm speaking to you from Fremantle, Western Australia, down the road from the Perth Stadium, which was in the bid for this World Cup. And as a football fan, I guess I was really heartbroken that we weren't part of the 2015 Asian Cup that we hosted, which was such a great tournament. And Perth being a gateway to Asia as a major city here, do we know how the selection of the stadiums will pan out and whether Perth is pretty safe to be part of it?
Yeah, so what we know is that FIFA would love to be here as soon as they can be here to start commencing a process of selecting stadiums and host cities. Unfortunately, COVID's going to delay that process a little bit. But we know that all of our host cities that have gone into the bid were well received by FIFA, and the same for New Zealand as well. The next steps for us are to work with FIFA on what their optimal number of venues would be. Now that the competition has expanded, additional stadiums will be required. So I think in Russia there were 12 stadiums, and that was the same number of teams. In France, for only 24 teams, there were 9 stadiums. So we've put forward a combination of 13 stadiums across Australia and New Zealand. So the next step now is to really put a case to FIFA as to why we want to play games right across Australia. We want everyone to participate in the FIFA Women's World Cup. We've also got base camps identified in all of the areas, all of the host cities. So again, this is the first time base camps have actually been part of a Women's World Cup bid. They've been in Men's World Cups forever. So having a team based in your host city or in a region around a host city really also allows the festival of football to be taken to parts where potentially games won't be played.
Jane, thank you so much for taking us in depth around the bid and take us on that journey. I think I've got a much more broader appreciation of what it takes to bid successfully for an event like this, and so much more excited as well just to understand that. What's next for you now, Jane?
Yeah, so I'll be in the FIFA Women's World Cup office at FFA and working with FIFA to start setting up the delivery model and the governance structures for the World Cup. And then once the entity is set up, it's the entity then that will start employing people to work on the delivery of the tournament. And that would be my plan, to stick around and to see it through.
Thank you so much, Jane. And just for the listener, how can they keep supporting and really get into this World Cup on the journey? That's 3 more years to go. How can they support?
Well, at this stage, the AS1 channels are still live, so they can still get up to date through that process, through those channels. And then FIFA will start creating a brand around the tournament, and that's so they can keep up to date on everything that's happening as we move forward to 2023.
I've actually just had another little light bulb. We know that during this time there's been some massive events that have had to be cancelled and or postponed. It's brought up a whole new way of thinking around mega sporting events. And has this been a lesson or something that you've needed to now think about in regards to, okay, what are some of the risks that present themselves when planning for an event?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the major sporting events and also the arts industry has now been changed forever. And the way that you tackle the development and the delivery of a major tournament will never ever be the same. There will always be greater risks that have to be thought through. And obviously the insurance industry is really going to have to take another view of how major events are insured. So yeah, absolutely. The capacity issue of stadiums, the issue of crowds moving through precincts, any event that has a mass gathering has been changed forever.
Jane, you've had such a massive impact, and you've helped change, hopefully, Australia forever and Australia and New Zealand forever through the contribution you've made to getting this World Cup. So thank you so much for joining me on the show, and thank you for what you've done as well.
Thank you, Abid. Thank you for having me.
What an absolute beauty of an episode that was. Thanks to Jane Fernandez for joining us, and a huge thank you to you for listening. As always, the goodies for this episode will be on abidimam.com. Until next time, keep smiling, keep scoring.